Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the third session of the Study UK Smart Talk Webinar Series 2021. Smart Talk aims to bring the best of British and Malaysian talents to give inspirational talks to young people and students and raise their awareness of the pioneering work and projects being pursued in the UK and the East Asia region. This Smart Talk webinar series is sponsored by Qatar Airways, a multi-award winning airline recently announced as the Airline of the Year by the International Air Transport Rating Organization Skytrax for the sixth time from 2011, 2012, 2015, 2017, 2019 and now 2021. The airline has also won 5 additional awards, including World's Best Business Class in Airline Lounge, Airline Seat, Onboard Catering and Best Airline in the Middle East. Powered by the Qatar Airways Privilege Club, Qatar Airways Exclusive Student Club program is dedicated to offering you unparalleled opportunities, savings, and more so, you can aim for the skies throughout your educational journey. Fly to more than 140 destinations worldwide with Qatar Airways and enjoy 1,500 bonus Q miles upon enrollment to the Qatar Airways Student Club with the promo code BCSC21 to enjoy. Sign up to these exclusive offers by visiting the Student Club page as provided in the chat box.
As you pursue your education, let us be part of your journey, offering you exclusive benefits designed with your travel needs in mind. Experience a journey where comfort meets impeccable service and where you can stay connected with complimentary super Wi-Fi. Explore a world just waiting to be discovered. With special fares and more, you can share the memorable milestones along the way and enjoy a Privilege Club tier upgrade as a graduation gift, plus the flexibility you need to change your plans and travel when it suits you. Welcome to our student club. Join today and aim for the skies. Let's go further together.
As countries around the globe are returning to normal, to those of you who are about to embark on your study journey, do fly with the world's best airline of the year, Qatar Airways, if you're returning or flying back to campus in the UK. And this evening, the spotlight will be on a prominent and renowned figure in arts, Celyn Bricker. I hope everyone is well, and thank you so much for joining for what we hope will be a useful and engaging session. My name is Jasra Go, and I'm the Director of the British Council Malaysia and your host for today. So just before we start, a quick bit of housekeeping. This session is being recorded and we will share across the British Council's social media channels. Please remain on mute with your video and audio for the duration of the session. To note that if you submitted a question during registration, thank you, and we have incorporated this into the session. Last but not least, please do maximize your device screen for better webinar experience. So before we start properly, here is a brief background about Celyn. Celyn Bricker is a British visual artist whose work explores technology and our relationship to nature. He holds a master from the University of Edinburgh, and his work explores these themes across a range of media, working with AI technology as well as painting, printmaking, and installation. During the session today, we'll also have the privilege of viewing some of Celyn's work as he talks through his experience. He has also shown a lot of his work widely in Europe, North America, and Asia, and had his work collected by the Royal Scottish Academy and the National Collection of Mexico. He has had his work covered in Forbes magazine and was recently invited as a speaker to the World Artificial Intelligence Conference in Shanghai. Celyn is co-founder of CELU Studio, an interdisciplinary art studio that uses art to both communicate and address environmental issues. So, with introductions completed, perhaps we'd like to move to our first question. which is really to focus on your education and career pathway. Perhaps, I think, Caroline, one of the things that I'm really interested in was what really spurred you to pursue an education in the arts. What motivated you?
Hi, yeah, and thanks for having me today. So what inspired me to pursue the arts? It was actually something that I had always wanted to do, really. For me, growing up, there hadn't been much of a question of what I was going to study. I was thinking it would be somewhere in the creative field. I'd thought about architecture or design at one point. But certainly during my time in secondary school, it was mostly fine art that I was really focused on, particularly painting at that time. And really, I think also growing up in the UK, when I was young, my parents would often take me to museums. And one of the great things about the UK is actually that museums and art galleries are often free. So it's very easy to go and visit. So I think that also had an impact on me growing up. This early exposure to art. So I was always kind of in this field, going in this direction.
Were you ever encouraged to consider more kind of popular career paths, a lawyer, an engineer, a doctor?
I was lucky, very lucky with my parents that they were always very supportive of me going in this direction, going into the arts. The pressure I got actually was a little bit more from school at the time. In my secondary school, they were, because I was also, I did reasonably well at the other subjects, and so some teachers were expecting me to go into another field. But from my parents, at least, they were always very, very encouraging. But of course, yeah, there's also sometimes, I suppose, a social expectation that you might do something else. If it wasn't my parents directly, I guess maybe other family members may have had some questions. My grandmother certainly did. I remember she was very worried that I was going to do art. And then actually she would, in fact, even after I went to go and study art, she would tell her friends that I was doing something else. And it would normally change as well. So one day I was studying chemistry, and then next day she would say, "Oh no, he's gone to be a lawyer or something." She would sort of invent something because she never wanted to admit that I was studying art. But that was the only problem in my family, really. I was lucky.
Celyn, I think a lot of students do struggle with making that decision. Do I go for more creative courses, or do I go for something which is more, where I would say conventional in society? And from your personal, if you could recall personally, when you made that choice to choose those subject areas when you were going into university, did you ever thought about what's going to happen 3 years when I graduated? Where am I going to go and work? Have you ever thought about this? Because this is something which I think a lot of Asian students, they start with, this is what I want to study, because at the end of that 3 years, I want to go into X, Y, or Z. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's also certainly a sensible way to think. I think when I was at the age of going to university, I was just very focused on being an artist, and I wasn't really thinking of exactly how that would work. I just had this very strong passion for making art. I had to have the support from my family. And so I could go and study, study art. And I never thought I would be anything other than an artist at the end of it. But since graduating, you of course have to find ways to be an artist, but maybe also support yourself in some other a sort of secondary career, as it were, or you use your art practice as a way to survive. So that's why in the past 2 years I've created this studio, which is a way to have also more commercial type projects, or projects that are more connected with design or working with a client in a way, at the same time as having my art practice. They're all connected in the way what I'm doing, but this is one way that I was sort of doing it. But for students who are wanting to study something creative, I'd absolutely encourage them to do that if that's really what they want to do, because I think the creative industries are something that are certainly going to be needed. There's certainly are job opportunities for people in creative fields. It's hard to be completely replaced by a robot if you're in a creative industry.
That's really, really good advice to all our young students out there. I think it's passion first, because that passion then drives you through your career and through your life, and then the road itself you will be able to walk that road out because you have that passion and the drive behind you, and I think that's really very, very valuable advice. And if we could just maybe go back to your time at university then, and perhaps a huge part of who you are today, where you are today, were based on the time that you studied in Edinburgh, and also I think a year in Milan as well. Perhaps would you be able to advise and why you chose those two cities, and actually what was the experience there as a young student in Edinburgh and Milan?
So I chose Edinburgh. It was for the course specifically, actually, that I wanted to do. The course in Edinburgh, which I did, is a fine art course, but it was actually split across the university and Edinburgh College of Art, and that's it's quite unique in the UK. You have art colleges and universities, but then it's difficult to find a place where you have a course which is in both places at the same time. So it was kind of doing 2 degrees at once, and I was just interested in that because it also meant I could be in a university setting and continue a kind of more academic career at the same time as doing the art. Even though the art was really the focus for me, it was really useful to have this academic aspect as well. And certainly people who did my course, they go into all kinds of degrees afterwards, or into many different kinds of fields within the arts. So some work in museums, or they run galleries, or they go to auctions, or they, like me, stick with the arts itself. So that is something for students also, or prospective students. They can also look at what people go on to do afterwards if they have that kind of question. You can see, what a course will then lead you to do. But Edinburgh, anyway, as it happens, is also a great city to live in as a student. It's quite small. It's great apart from the weather, I would admit. I think it would be quite a shock from Malaysia going to Edinburgh. Especially in the winter, it's pretty rough. But culturally, it's fascinating. It has a lot of events, and for a city of its size, because it is very small, it really has a very rich kind of cultural life, particularly with the Edinburgh Fringe, which happens, or the Edinburgh Festival and Fringe, which happens every August. So that's quite an amazing event in the UK. People from all over the world come to Edinburgh to put on different shows and events and music and arts, and so that's a really great aspect of the city. Then Milan, one of the nice things about the course I was doing in Edinburgh is that in the third year there was this option to study abroad. So that was at the time I was very interested in Italy and traditional Renaissance artwork, and also interested in Italian culture. So at that time, the university had links with certain universities in Europe. So one of them was the Accademia in Milan, and that was quite different to Edinburgh. It's a bigger city than Edinburgh. It's a bit more industrial in some ways, and it feels like a much bigger city. So that was a kind of interesting experience as well. And of course, a totally different system and different language, and all of that stuff was really really valuable actually for me as an experience. And also, what I learned there was very different to what I was learning in Edinburgh. Also, the kind of the teaching style and the system was really quite different. And then it was also in a way that experience that towards the end of my time in Edinburgh, there was this opportunity to apply for a scholarship called the John Kinross, which was to go to Florence, actually, in Italy for a few months, and they would fund you to do that. So after my experience in Milan, I knew I really wanted to do this thing. So that's also a good thing about, again, advice for any students is when you're at a university, there are all these kinds of opportunities around, things to apply for, or competitions, or things to get involved in, and yeah, you really should make the most of them while you're there.
And whilst you're on giving advice to students when they're at university, what would be your top 3 advice to students going into university now? What should they really what do they absolutely need to experience or do as a university student?
What should they really do when they're there? Okay. I suppose it depends where they're going in some ways. Top 3 advice for what they should do when they're there. As I was just saying, I think, making the most of so obviously studying is an important thing you're doing while you're there, but around the university, there are all these opportunities in terms of different clubs or other activities or societies that you can join. And those can give you a really rich experience and also help actually prepare you for time after university. So when I was in university, I was also involved with the different student magazines and the kind of arts magazines that the university different students were running them basically. So that gave me great experience for arts writing, and that's something I've also done since is working in writing reviews and writing for different publications. So those kind of things are something that you should do for sure. And that also, those things are not something that they might not tell you to do it. No one's going to really tell you to go and do any specific thing. You have to sort of, it's really on the individual to explore and find what you're interested in and go and meet new people and this kind of thing. So definitely join those sorts of societies. I think if you're studying abroad, then certainly traveling in the country that you're studying in is also very valuable, and getting to know the place outside of just the university town or that city you're in. And I think there's a temptation if you are studying abroad of it's easy to try to sort of stay together with people from your own country, which is totally understandable, because you might be feeling some kind of culture shock, or you don't like the food, which is totally understandable in the UK. But nevertheless, it's you might only have these few years where you're really living abroad, so you should really try and meet people from as many different places as you can, and make friends, I think, with those people if you can. Yeah, I think that would be my thoughts on the spot there.
Thank you so much, Celyn. I think that's really good advice, and I think for students out there who are planning your journey to the UK, I think what Celyn has said, and especially about ensuring that you do make friends outside of your comfort zone. Look for opportunities, travel, and join clubs. I think these are all things that will be really of value once you come back to Malaysia. And those are the experience, those are the investment in yourselves that actually you will always have. And I think that's really invaluable advice. And Celyn, if I could now move on to career, and that's something which I think a lot of students, especially those going into creative, would also be thinking about as well. And I see that you are extremely passionate and active in advocating for environmental issues using art as a medium of communication, and also AI technology as well as printmaking and installation are part of the areas of your work. What does your typical workday look like as a visual artist, as a studio owner?
Right. Yeah, so as you said, I'm doing quite a lot of different things. So it means actually that I'm not sure I really have a typical workday, in fact. So, I mean, a few weeks ago, I was preparing for a solo exhibition, just a exhibition of my work, and then so that meant a typical day was basically the whole day making art in the studio. So I was making a series of paintings, but they were made with a very special material that it can clean the air, it can remove pollution from the air. So I was making this series of paintings for a piece. So that was every day working in the studio. But then since then, I've been doing other projects which can require travel within China. I'm based in China at the moment, and obvious reasons, it's a bit difficult to move around. But so yeah, I had a project where I was working with an embassy here in China, and then the next project was then working with a zoo, and then the next one was in a place in Hangzhou, and it's kind of can be a lot of different things going on that one. So it's a combination of working in the studio, making work, planning or making proposals or brainstorming ideas, going to meetings or visiting site locations. It's a mix of all these kinds of things.
Celyn, maybe would you be able to give us an example of your work in your field currently? Yeah.
Sure. So yeah, I'll quickly explain one project, and then afterwards I'll show you a very short video. So one project I'm working on at the moment with the studio is we're thinking about using art can be a good way to communicate issues, particularly environmental issues. But it can also be used as a way to potentially also solve some issues. And it can communicate at the same time as solving them. So one thing I've been thinking about is it's the issue of bird collisions with glass. I don't know if you know about this problem, but for example, in the US, they estimate 1 billion birds die per year from collisions with glass. And I'm sure this will be also an issue in Malaysia. Malaysia is part of this. It's called the East Asian Australasian Flyway. So birds fly from Russia all the way down to New Zealand, passing through China, and then going through, or crossing across into Malaysia, Indonesia, Australia. Anyway, one issue, as I'm saying, is that the birds will collide with windows, with glass, because they can't see them. However, many birds are able to see UV light. Humans cannot. So I've been making this kind of prototype for an artwork on glass, which would be invisible to humans, but it would be visible to birds. So if you can just quickly show the video. So you can see this is how it would appear to a bird. And this is, for a human eye, it's transparent. So it becomes visible just by putting on the UV light to the piece. Yeah. So the idea is that this this material, it could be applied to existing buildings, and then you could have this additional effect at night where you could illuminate the building with a UV light, and it could totally transform the appearance of the building, because in the day it would be invisible, to the human eye. So this is also a way for us to be, one is to be, protecting nature in the city, or protecting nature from. It's something you can do while you're at home, basically. It's not a very complicated environmental issue to solve, but it's something that everyone could do in some ways. But then, as I'm saying, by putting on this UV light at night, it also could change the identity of the building, give it this whole other kind of artistic quality. And I was experimenting with a particular pattern there, but it could really be anything, any kind of design or pattern on the glass. So this is one set of projects that we're working on at the moment, and we've had a few places interested, in China that we can start experimenting with. The other benefit, hopefully, of this particular piece is that because it is made with a UV reflective material, it would mean that actually there's less UV entering the building, so it's not as hot, so it would require less air conditioning. But we're still in the experimental phase. So we're still developing this piece. That's one example.
That's really amazing, Celyn. And I really hope that all the property developers around the world who are building all these high-rise will start to take up this model, because it's really something. I think personally for me, I think it's more for the birds than anything else. That it's amazing, the statistics that you've said, and we need to protect nature and be part of that. So it's really amazing, and I hope that you will get a lot of take up from developers around the world who are making all these big buildings. Yeah.
I hope so. I mean, so there are some existing products a little bit like this, but what I really want to do is, it doesn't really solve the issue of all the existing glass, all these buildings that have been built with all of this glass. If you're building a new building, you can, if the architect is interested in this, they could make adjustments to make it more bird safe. But yeah, I hope I can, it's something that I could hopefully spread, and also to raise awareness, because I'm thinking it's a way, because it could be quite dramatic, this sudden change in the building at night, and then people feel it could be interesting for people to learn more about the issue.
And Celyn, one of the things that you mentioned just now is you were in the UK and now you're in China, and we have a question here from one of our participants who wants to know how to establish an international arts career like what you have done. Like what are the channels or platforms that they should be going in to try and look at all these opportunities?
Yeah. So I remember also when I was younger asking this question to other artists or people, and always being very frustrated because they could never give me a very straight answer. So I'm sorry if I'm going to be repeating this problem and not give a very straight answer, because the difficult thing about arts, in a way, is everyone is kind of finding their own path through it. There isn't compared to another career where there might be very clear steps that you take, or you join this office, you work your way up through this, you get promotion, blah 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 blah. Arts is a little bit different because often you're creating your own career based on your own particular set of interests. So I think, but in general, so the question is, how can I future international arts career? If this person is already thinking of going to the UK, then that, in a sense, it would be the start of their international arts career. because they could be, you know, a Malaysian based in London or based wherever. And you could start making your work, you could start sharing it abroad. And that in itself is basically how you'd get started. Now, you know, it's becoming more and more important that you have this kind of social media presence. This is also something very helpful. This is something I'm learning, actually, to be honest. It doesn't come very naturally to me to do this kind of social media stuff, but other artist friends I have who are good at it get a lot of opportunities through that, and a lot of international opportunities, because I have Chinese artist friends, and they've been, you know, spotted online, and then a gallery in Europe might be interested in their work and can promote them in that way. So a lot of it is about getting out there, sharing your work, getting noticed. But if they're listening to this talk and they're already thinking of going abroad, that's already a good step. And the second part of the question is, any relevant Academy of Arts that value young talents? I mean, any art college is going to be valuing young artists, and any good art college should be supporting you to develop your career, and giving you some of the skills, you know, to make it as an artist afterwards.
Yeah, but if in the case of yourself, Celyn, because you have been to various countries and various places to do your exhibit, to work with other artists, what did you encounter any difficulty or challenges in that appreciation of understanding your work through the lens of a different culture, or people not understanding what you're trying to achieve here because the background is so different and diverse? And how did you manage to communicate or overcome this?
I mean, that's a very interesting thing about being in a different culture, is thinking about the different way that people will approach art, or think about the issues that you're trying to explore in your art. I think being in the UK, I had quite a good sense of what people would find interesting, or what would be maybe challenging or confrontational for people. And that felt broadly similar in Italy. Some differences, cultural differences, of course, but then coming to China, it was really quite different. You know, culturally, it's a totally different place. Although art is a kind of strange one in that there is a kind of international arts language in a way. There is this kind of circuit of international arts, which is kind of above any individual country, you know, and there is a kind of accepted way that art is. But that, in a way, that's less interesting to me than what the average person thinks about art in any individual country. So I've enjoyed that in China, actually. Sort of thinking about the cultural background here and how people respond to my work here. I don't think of any example. I think in China, because there is just a very different cultural background in terms of, for example, painting. People here are much more familiar with, you know, with Chinese painting and calligraphy, and the way in which that is made, compared to Western painting. And I think that's also, not that people don't do Western style paintings in China. Of course, there's many people do and study that. But the average person, I think, will have a little bit more, be a bit more comfortable with the traditional Chinese style. But that in itself has also influenced some of my work and some of my style, I guess, of working. China also has influenced me because of the amount of because of the speed of change and the speed at which projects can be done here. It's very different to I think other places. So that's been very interesting, you know, for my career as well, to try and do so many different things and have so many things that are possible.
So Celyn, maybe we take a slightly different perspective here and speak to parents of our students who are considering pursuing courses in the creative arts, what would you advise parents who are worried about how their kids would turn out, and you know, in a very, you know, probably something which they are not able to see very clearly? What would your advice be to parents?
Well, first, I think honestly that concern is totally understandable. I mean, it's not a crazy thing for a parent to be worried about if they're not familiar with the creative industry. I would understand why maybe they'd have some concerns. I think it also has really to come from the student. I mean, the parent has to be confident that the student is really truly passionate about this, because I feel it's a bit of a cliche and it's something that people always say about the arts, but you really do need to be passionate about it. Basically, like, you have to really want to do this and be very driven to do it, because it is, you know, competitive, and it can be a challenging path for sure. That's not to say it can't be very rewarding and a very fulfilling one at the same time. The question is, you have to be talented, otherwise it's hard. That's true. I think the most important talent is actually hard work, though. That's the most important talent, is being able to work hard. And being able to keep going. Because there are many talented people who maybe are unable to keep making art. So it's really about this kind of perseverance. And if the parent feels that their child sort of has these qualities, then maybe they don't need to be so wouldn't need to be so worried, you know. But I would also say about arts and creative things is it's something you can always you can move into it from another career or from another angle, you know. If it's for any individual student, if it's something that's very difficult for them to be able to do, from the perspective of the parents, it's something, as we were saying, they can still explore it through their, you know, through work in societies or clubs or associations when they're abroad. And they can always come in and can be an artist later. You know, you can come to an artist at any point, using your own life experience and the skills that you have you've built up. So, I mean, I know people who have done undergraduate degrees in biology or engineering or all kinds of things, and then afterwards they decide, actually, I really want to still do art, and then they take what they've learned and they bring it into their art, and it can be very interesting. You know, if you're an expert in biology, but then you decide to be an artist, you have this whole range of knowledge that that other people might not have. So that's something people can always think about later as well.
And so Celyn, I think one of the things that for me, as I listen to you talk, is that your work, you are advocating for very specific environmental issues. And why did you do that? Why did you choose to be that advocate? And also, what do you consider to be success?
So when I was at university, I meant to mention this earlier, but I guess I'll bring it up now. So there's actually a picture also that you can share. You can find the picture to share. This was a project I did, but yes, there we go. So this is actually at Edinburgh University. This was a project I did with an artist called JR, who is now is very well known artist. And he does a lot of work which is connecting with different kinds of social issues or working with communities. And so this experience when I was at university was really quite fundamental for me, because it showed me of a way of making art that it can be in a public space, and it can be connecting with different social issues. In this case, we were doing a project. It's not about the environment, but it was actually about surveillance, about CCTV surveillance. So the people in the bottom of the photograph, their job was to look at security cameras, and then people in the top were actually people who had been photographed in these areas. So, but anyway, this was just an experience that really made me think about what art can do, or the way that which you can use art in a public way. So after that experience, I made a lot of different projects, many of them working with communities, or having some sort of or a social focus. So in Italy, I was working with migrants and refugees, people who had just arrived into Italy, and then later I was doing projects in Beijing, working also with migrant workers and people in factories and things like this. The real turning point for me in terms of focus on the environment was when my wife and we went traveling. We did this very long journey, starting in East Africa, and we were trying to follow the human migration route, the kind of ancient human migration route of everyone leaving Africa and traveling across the world in different routes. So we spent about a year traveling, and all along that way, we really saw different impacts of climate change, and different impacts on biodiversity loss, and the way in which people already were really experiencing these impacts. So we came back to Beijing, and then together we decided that we would start this studio and try to focus on these environmental issues, or try and do what we could. With my background being in the arts, it made sense that we would have this studio that would try to communicate or offer some kind of creative solutions for these environmental problems. So that was sort of how I made that shift into the environment, particularly. Sorry, there was a second part to your question. Was there?
Yeah, I mean, what would you consider to be success?
What would I consider to be success? For me personally, I think a project which has some impact, I think I would consider successful. So, for example, the bird glass that I showed you, if I can really land that project and it can get it to have a real world effect, and really reduce the amount of birds dying in this way, so improving biodiversity, or reducing loss of biodiversity, that would be an example of something I would think of it as successful. Personally, of course, if you're doing something you find meaningful, then that I think is successful. So that this project, I mean, and others, I feel that they are meaningful, and they're worth pursuing. So I feel in that sense, I feel that is also is successful.
Celyn, I mean, looking at what you have done now and what you have achieved, I would definitely consider you to be a very successful individual and an artist. Along the way, from graduation until now, what would you consider to be your top 3 challenges, and especially I think for our young students and budding graduates, do you think they will also face those similar challenges as well?
Top 3 challenges. Wow, you like your top 3s. Top 3. So I think keeping going is something certainly that can be challenging in the arts if you're working as an individual artist or even starting a studio. It's kind of keeping going before you have to keep going even without people, you know, being as nice as you and telling you that you're successful. Yeah, so that you have to either have a lot of you know, personal confidence in what you're doing, or you have the support of your family. So I'm very lucky. My wife is very supportive of what I'm doing as well, as are my parents, as I said. But yeah, keeping going is a challenge. I think it can be challenging in arts to stay true to what you yourself are interested in, when there's always commercial pressures on you to do something else. And in the end, that kind of commercial pressure will often mean you're doing something less interesting, art wise, you know. There's always someone with a shopping mall that wants something in there, you know, and it's not often the best choice as an artist to pursue that sort of thing. But sometimes, I mean, of course, sometimes you have to keep the studio going or keep you know, to survive. So sometimes those kind of pressures can be difficult to deal with. And then another challenge might be actually having an idea is one thing, but then really executing something is really very different. Once the idea goes from your head into the world, and then you have to try and work out all the practical implications of it, that's really can be very, very challenging. And that's where the work is, actually. It's not really just having the idea, it's kind of being able to persist with the idea for a very long time. So, for example, the glass piece I showed you, that's already been more than a year just kind of working with that idea. And we have been lucky this year that we've had places we can show it and develop it, but it may be many more years, you know, of continuing this single thing, single project. We're doing other things at the same time, but there's always going to be, every project will have these very numerous kinds of technical challenges or other kinds of you know, connections with reality that you have to deal with. And the challenge for people, the question was also people who have graduated, right, and their challenges. I think it depends on where in the creative industries you're wanting to work, and each one will have its own set of challenges. I think if you're trying to go into fashion, for example, it's kind of it's a very different path to if you're going into design or arts. But maybe those things I think would probably still apply, actually, like having to keep going and persevering with individual projects, and yeah, these things would still apply, I think.
So Kelly, on that then, has the pandemic affected the industry, and generally are new artists kind of mostly self-employed freelance, or actually are there actually quite a lot of companies that are recruiting artists?
So yeah, certainly the pandemic has affected the industry all over the world in different ways. I think certainly in the UK and Europe, they had quite a tough time with the pandemic, and the creative industries, you know, galleries and many places shutting. I think it was hard for many artists there. I don't know Malaysia. I guess it may have been similar situation. Maybe fewer opportunities, things like that. A lot of artists have responded to it, though, in different ways. Last year, we did a project bringing together artists during the pandemic, and they sort of were able. We created a virtual reality platform where they could people could see the work that artists from all over the world were making during the pandemic time. So that was interesting. And sorry, there was another part to your question about being hired by.
About being hired, or is it are they mostly all ending up as freelancer?
Ah, okay. Yeah, so if you look in the job, recruiting, they don't normally look for an artist, but they do sometimes. For example, you might see, for example, I noticed, like Tesla is looking for a concept artist, or these other companies which require a kind of creative output will be looking for people with these creative backgrounds and skills. So it's definitely possible to go from an arts degree and to go into a job. Some people will go into teaching or into academia or other kinds of companies that need these skills, which can be design, architecture. Even if you haven't done architecture, then those studios will still require at certain points they will want artists to create artist impressions of certain things. This can be also a direction for some people. But you will when you just graduate, you'll almost always need to find something to kind of work alongside your own art practice. If you're wanting to be just a fine artist and make your own work for galleries, you'll normally need to do something alongside that until you can sustain yourself just through your art, and that can be a long road.
And my final question to you, Celyn, is if you were to depart this world tomorrow, what would you like people to remember Celyn Bricker? How would you like people to remember you?
Well, you said so many nice things about me. I think you can write my obituary. You can. What did you say? Very successful and blah blah blah. No. How would they like? This isn't a big concern for me, actually. If they remember me or not, I don't care that much. As long as my family are okay and don't forget me, then that's okay. But I would still like to think I'd done something meaningful, and then I'd done work that had hopefully some impact, and I made things better in some way, whether it was environmentally or otherwise. I would like to think that I had made some difference.
Thank you. And this question came about because we had a participant who wanted to know how would they be able to establish themselves in this modern world and benchmarking themselves to Da Vinci or Van Gogh and things like that. But I think what you have said is actually very, very reflective of the situation. It's not about comparing with other people, but it's actually about ensuring that you're fulfilled and you do believe that you have made that difference and made that impact to the world as an individual. And I think that's really important. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think, of course, it's great to get inspiration from the masters of the past. But you shouldn't really compare your situation to theirs. Certainly someone like Da Vinci. I mean, they're in a totally different social, economic, historical situation. Da Vinci, from a very young age, he was apprenticed to work just on his art, in a studio. Those kind of great masters were from a very young age doing a very specific kind of thing. Da Vinci, of course, is a special case because of all his other talents. Van Gogh, I'm not sure you want to be Van Gogh anyway. He was a very troubled man. So I don't think they need to be wanting to be like him. Of course, he was very unique in what he was able to bring to art. but yeah, we all have our own situation, and we're all in a very different world now from them. So I don't think it's necessarily helpful to establish yourself amongst them. Although I totally understand where the question is coming from, because especially when you're 17, 18, that's where you want to be mentioned amongst those names. But just work hard and see where you end up, and that's all you can do, really.
Thank you very much. That's really, really very, very genuine advice, and I think very invaluable. So, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, that is all we have time for today, and we'll have to bring the session to a close. On behalf of Study UK and the British Council, I'd like to thank Celyn Bricker for his valuable contribution today. I'm sure all of you have found Celyn's input extremely helpful and informative, and through his talk, you can actually get the spirit of UK education, which is individual, innovative, and inspirational. To our audience, thank you again for joining us. Do stay tuned for the next Smart Talk webinar series sponsored by Qatar Airways, happening every Saturday at 4 p.m. Our next session will be with Daniel Rahman, a well-respected higher education specialist and experienced in the areas of public administration and policy. So spread the words to those who are looking to pursue a career related to higher education and public administration. And finally, if you have any questions, comments, or feedback on today's session or the series, please feel free to contact us at Study UK. So thank you again to Celyn Bricker and all attendees for your questions and contributions. Wishing you all a great rest for the weekend. Thank you very much, and see you all soon.